I think Duke does pride itself in being diverse.
Is Duke inclusive enough?
But there is kind of like a social segregation.
A problem of kind of socializing on campus.
As a society, Duke, in my opinion, is very stratified.
It is true that not every space or community at Duke is actively open and welcoming to different people.
I think it's definitely inclusive, but I wouldn't say inclusive enough. We don't get enough attention. So I'm Jingyi. I'm from China. Born and raised there. I'm a junior here. I study statistical science and Russian studies. Wow. I don't know if you agree, but I think diversity is a very vague term. There are a lot of ways you could define this, so I don't know exactly what you mean by diversity, but on the very superficial level, you do see people with different colors of skin who speak different languages, coming from all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of social, financial backgrounds. So it is a very diverse community. On the surface. I don't know if Duke did this on purpose, but it's weird when me and my roommate last year, who's a black student, found out that our dorm, the majority of our dorm is Asian students and black students. Like there are only like 1 or 2 dorms with white students or other races. So we felt really weird because like we didn't know if the school did this on purpose or it's just a coincidence. But when we realized that, we felt kind of weird. We didn't dig into it just like to find out what really happened. But like that was one moment that really made me feel like, are we treated differently? Like people always say international students are such an important group on campus. We appreciate them being here. We appreciate the cultures that they bring here. But that's just on the surface. I do think that there are this so-called like class difference, like being international, being Asian, being Chinese, definitely puts me in a place that's not determined by me or who I am. Like honestly, besides economic status, I've never put myself into like a social ladder before when I was home or anywhere else. I didn't realize that there are so many ways of classifying people here, and this is supposed to be the country that's most inclusive, that doesn't care who you are, what color your skin is, which race you are, but everything's just so clearly classified, and for a long time I didn't understand.
I'm Altamash. I'm a junior here at Duke. I'm currently majoring in English and statistics and minoring in education. One thing that happens within the bounds of the classroom is that we always hear about African American students, Latin American students, gender diversity. We hear of all these things, but we never hear of the views of the international student. As an international student in one of my classes, I have to be the person who brings up that, hey guys, remember the international student is somebody whose point of view you should be hitting and whose point of view you should be appreciating. I want to say most classes at Duke, even though the international student is not at the top of their mind, they do make an active effort once they realize that the international students do have a voice. Then they try to include the international student within the framework of the class, which I think is a very, very strong, welcoming move to make. CAP seems to be something for the other, for the American, not for the international student. Other institutional inclusivity concerns would be the Career Center, for example, that does not have a counselor that is focused on working with international students. Even though we make, at this point, 12% of the undergraduate student body. It's a pretty big number. I want to say housing, in my humble opinion, is the greatest deterrent in terms of social inclusivity. I want to say for a lot of people that is a result of the rush process and also a result of general conversation happening within freshman dorms, because freshman year tends to be when most people rush for different fraternities and sororities. That's when the idea of them being socially stratified comes into existence. If you don't see an international student in a fraternity or a sorority, or if you see 2 or 3 of them at the very most, surrounded entirely by white American males and females, it's a pretty strong message, in my humble opinion. If you have a certain structure, societal structure on display visually, that leaves an impact internally. We assume, going by the official number, that about 30% of Duke students are affiliated with some sort of selected living group or fraternity or sorority, right? But I want to give a ballpark figure of 80% of the people, if not more, are impacted by the social stratification that happens around, because everybody who is part of freshman dorms sees the rush process happening. It's a very visually spectacular experience, and because of that, I want to say everybody questions their own sociability. If I am not rushing for a sorority, if I'm not rushing for a fraternity, if I am not making active effort to join an SLG, am I a likable person? If I get rejected by said living groups, am I a likable person? Which is a question that is a lot more commonly asked on this university than on a lot of others. My roommate right now, he is from a different university. He's here for only a semester, and he's from another American university, and he constantly talks about how at Duke, sorority and fraternity life is so intermixed with regular life. And a big reason for that he points out is the geography of the college, which is, if I look outside my window, the first thing I see are 2 fraternities, right? It's very visual. And whenever they're having parties, I can hear what's happening. It's always right there. It's always a presence that I cannot ignore. Fraternity and sorority life is set up in such a way at Duke University where it is very, very conspicuous.
So my name is Florence Tesha, but most people call me Tesha. I come from Tanzania and I'm a senior now. The way I understand inclusivity is the idea that you feel, even as a foreigner, you still feel a sense of belongingness, and the people who are there try different ways to make you feel comfortable and to help you navigate things that work for you. And at Duke, I find that faculty and staff try a really good, they make an effort to really help students from different places. So it's always easy to talk to a faculty and explain your difficulties, and they make the inclusiveness in class is more present, I would say, than outside of class. One thing I've noticed during my 4 years at Duke is that when people are outside, they hardly interact compared to when they're in class. And so you may find that you have friends in the same class, but when you're outside, you pass each other like you don't know each other. And so, and also I've realized from the way friend groups form, it's really, for international students, most of them find friends during international orientation. And most of those who don't find friend groups during international orientation find it so hard to find like a sense of belongingness. I know a lot of people who are struggling to find just a friend to talk to, like a genuine friend. And I've met a few freshmen throughout, and most of them will try to rush to join sorority or fraternities or living groups just to find a way to belong in a place. And I find that nothing is bad with that, except when you have pressure to do something out of your comfort zone just to belong in a place. Maybe there's something missing that we can all try to work out.
I'm Paulina. I'm from Mexico, but I have been living in Switzerland for the past 3 years. It's just like something that I've noticed because I guess like such a large part of the international population is made up of East Asian and South Asian students, that a lot of the cultural groups on campus are Asian cultural groups. And I feel that as well might alienate some of the other internationals a bit. Maybe that is also part of the problem of like the segregation, that like within the internationals is also like a huge quantity of people who will not interact with the other population.
I was born in South Carolina, but when I was 9 months old, I moved back to China. And then when I was about 6 years old, I moved back to Georgia. Not only because I'm Chinese American, but because I'm also in international association. So I'm around a lot of international students, but I'm also around, obviously, a lot of domestic students. And I hear the stories that both of them say. So a lot of the domestic students will say, oh, well, I don't think the international students want to hang out with us. You know, they have their own group of people. But at the same time, a lot of the international students will feel very, intimidated to hang out with the domestic students because of different customs, because people have already formed their social circles. And so I think that trying to bridge that gap and trying to show people that they are welcome in both places is really important. And I don't think that Duke is doing a very good job of initiating any change. I don't think that Duke is doing anything from like a ground level up to try and include everybody.
My name is Manish. I'm a fourth-year student here at Duke studying biomedical engineering and global health. When you talk about inclusivity, I think its definition should also include some element of intentionality in campus spaces in accommodating these people, and different communities and spaces on campus are actively open and welcoming people who are maybe from minority groups. That's where maybe inclusivity on campus might be more lacking, in my opinion, is that that active sense of bringing people together and welcoming people from all kinds of backgrounds, because sometimes it can seem that certain communities are more isolated or closed off. I mean, again, comes back to housing a lot, I think. So when you talk about exclusive groups like selective living groups and fraternities and sororities, I mean, often we hold events that are exclusive, and so naturally people might not feel very welcome at these events because it's an event that is held for a group. The issue is that sometimes when these events are held and they are open to everyone, they might also not be very welcoming. Most SLGs, in my opinion, are diverse enough that most people feel comfortable coming to an open event at an SLG. I mean, like personally, I would say I have not felt the same way about various events that are held by fraternities. I would generally feel comfortable reaching out to almost any individual at group and, if I had to start a conversation with them. Now, when you put people in groups, it's a very different dynamic, I think. So that's what we have to be conscious of. It's that when you put people in groups, I think that creates a dynamic that is much more difficult to broach, and how to deal with that is, I don't have an easy answer for that, but I think that's something to think about. So, I'm a member of Brownstone SLG, and I think when you talk about living groups at large, SLGs or fraternities and sororities or other non-affiliated living groups, they can all seem very intimidating to someone who is not very familiar to the system. So for me as an international student, it was difficult, confront this reality that, there are living groups on campus and that you can rush or apply to be part of these living groups, just because it's a concept that's so unfamiliar to me. And it's something that's very obvious about the system here in the US. So I think for me, I ended up joining an SLG primarily because I knew another international student who was also Singaporean in an SLG, and he was the one who reached out to me and said, hey, you should come and check out some of these events that we're having, and you should see if you like this. And I love the community, just because of that one person who was able to pull me in. If I did not have that person I could pull upon in order to introduce me to this community, I think that might have been a chance or opportunity that I missed out on, because I'm not sure that I would have felt welcome enough to explore these spaces on my own.
I'm Jeremy. I'm from Hong Kong. I'm a senior now, so I study neuroscience and economics. Inclusivity means, to me, that you can kind of go into anywhere and feel at home, welcomed, people want you there, you're a participating member. If not leading, you're following, or you're at least active, not being actively ignored. Having said that, because there are these student groups, I think there's a lot of cliques. If they don't feel included in the beginning, it's like a constant vicious cycle that they'll keep feeling kind of ostracized and outcasted, and then they'll just end up in their own rooms, and then they're like, wow, this sucks. That's just what I think. That's not my personal experience. But I've heard many friends who have experienced living alone, trying to meet people, but people don't want to meet them. when in terms of independent housing. I'm an RA for an independent house. So I think you work really hard to kind of people block together in their friends. Whether or not they socialize with each other, that's very difficult. No matter what you do, what you try to bring events, people just want to stick together and they're not quite as open to meeting each other. So they feel at home, but I don't know if it's like a community per se. But I've had this conversation with some friends who aren't RAs. This is just a theory, right? A concept. So what happens is when you rush these student groups, they take a lot of people who are extroverted, who are out there and dynamic, right? These are the people that usually have the qualities to bring together a community. But they absorb it all into the student groups. So then the people who don't get in or people who don't rush are people who are more reserved and quiet, which is fine, right? That I think they're both good people. But then they end up living alone and quiet, which might be what they want. For some people, that's what they want, and that's great. So independent houses is great too. But for people who are kind of quiet and reserved but want a community, maybe they're not the ones who can create that community. Maybe they need some sort of dynamic person or energetic person. But those people are usually absorbed into SLGs or Greek life. I think that was just a theory that we were just brainstorming why that was the case.
Especially at the beginning, like during orientation week, just kind of trying to foster people not consolidating into like one specific group of friends. So, kind of like doing different activities in which they have to like split off into different groups and like be exposed to all different kinds of people. But yeah, maybe just a bit more branching out in terms of like the geographic regions that are looked into. I don't know.
In terms of mission, you mean?
Yeah.
More diversity.
Maybe, yeah.
The visa services or CAPS, there could be more like voluntary reach out from them to the international group. Going to a psychologist is even a shame of going there just to talk about your mental issues. More info on this is not a shame, this is good for you, this is absolutely normal. That could probably help. Or make it less like it's a psychological thing. it's a you're having mental issues, so you come talk to us thing. Just make like some fun activities, like throwing plates, whatever, just to get people to know that there's this place existing on campus, and just come, let your anger, let your disappointment out. And if you want to talk, we could talk. If you want just a space to talk to your friend, we offer you a space with like maybe food or comfy sofa. You could just come here, sit, chill, do your work, and talk.
My suggestion, hire an international counselor for CAPS and for the Career Center. Abolish stratified student housing at Duke. And if student housing is to be stratified, if fraternity, sorority, and SLGs are to exist, then they should be in places that are not as conspicuous as they are right now. Maybe a introductory class at Duke, which I know the DSG or some other major group on campus is trying to bring into effect, an introductory class that forces all students out of their little bubble of selectivity into being more inclusive.
Creating an identity within every community, I think, can be very helpful. So, for example, within living communities, I think if we can continue the momentum that we have in establishing independent houses and giving them some sense of identity, that would be a good step, I think, because once independent houses have a strong structure, I think SLGs can partner with them in hosting events, for example, and then you have the mixing of the members.
RAs are very important in this aspect for independent people. There are a myriad of incentives why a person wants to be an RA. Someone wants to be, okay, I really want to foster community. Some people just want free housing. Some people just think they want to put that on their resume. And if it's the latter two, they don't have the incentive to really make it a better place. So I think some sort of vetting procedure to really narrow down who can really best serve as an RA, because I think this role is really critical for their students, that they're residents. and maybe some sort of shadowing. So I was just talking to my friend, and he was suggesting like maybe have a new RA follow and they, like kind of just tag along with an existing RA that's doing some good job with programming, and just kind of seeing different RAs and how they do it.
Maybe even more activities in the dorms. The RAs are already doing a really good job trying to put different events together. But at the same time, I think that it's not easy for, just reflecting on my own experience as a freshman, when I saw those emails of there's a barbecue, there's this, you are scared because you feel like, what will I say when I'm in, what do people do in a barbecue event? Because this is not something we have at home, for example, in Tanzania. So maybe even giving the students a place to feel that they're welcome. Like, it's a barbecue event where people do 1, 2, 3, 4. I just think making extra efforts to make someone more comfortable just at the beginning, until they don't feel that I will be still an alien within a party, and that even feels worse than being an alien in your own dorm. That would be something that might help.
I mean, there are definitely various things at Duke that unite all the students. So, I mean, take basketball, for example. If a Duke basketball game is playing, you can say with certainty that the majority of Duke students are going to be following the game in some fashion. And, that's something that unifies all students. And I think, beyond that, there are other things, too, that all Duke students care about, or a lot of Duke students care about. And I think using those things that unite everyone to bring people together, I think that's a good way to start conversations.